A single narrow waterway just sent shockwaves through the global economy, and the power broker who stepped in to fix it might not be who you expect.
Yeah, we are really looking at a fundamental shift in how global crises get resolved today.
Right now, today, April 17th, 2026, we are watching a massive breaking news story unfold in real time.
Truly unprecedented.
Iran just declared the Strait of Hormuz completely open to commercial ships. And this follows a really fragile 2-week ceasefire that just went into effect.
Right, and the global markets reacted instantly to this.
Oh, the numbers are staggering. I mean, oil prices plummeted 10% the moment the news broke.
Wow.
We are looking at Brent crude dropping from over $119 a barrel just last month down to just $87 a barrel today.
That is a massive swing.
It really is. And stock markets surged in response. The Dow Jones Industrial Average shot up by almost 600 points.
And airline stocks are just soaring right now.
Exactly. But here's the catch. U.S. President Donald Trump insists that the U.S. naval blockade on Iranian ports remains in full force until a final, comprehensive deal is signed.
Right, so the financial sector is, breathing this collective sigh of relief. But the physical reality on the water remains incredibly tense.
Because that American hard power is still out there.
Exactly. That U.S. blockade means American warships are still patrolling those waters. They are actively prepared to intercept, search, or just turn around any vessels approaching Iranian ports.
So the military standoff hasn't just magically vanished because the trading floors in New York are cheering.
No, not at all. The underlying pressure is very much still there.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are taking you right to the center of this crisis.
It's a complicated one.
It really is.
Yeah.
And we have pulled together a diverse stack of sources for you today. We're looking at live business updates, declassified intelligence reports, and international news investigations from The Guardian, CBS, and various diplomatic centers.
Lots of different angles to cover.
Yeah. Our mission today is to unpack exactly how this fragile peace happened. We are going to examine the silent giant pulling the strings behind the scenes, China.
The real wild card in all of this.
Right, so let's unpack this. We are going to explore China's sweeping economic stakes, the intense, almost desperate shuttle diplomacy they use to stop the bleeding, and
the swirling allegations of secret military support that complicate this entire narrative.
yes, those allegations are fascinating. But to truly grasp why Beijing stepped out of its usual background role to mediate a Middle Eastern conflict, we really have to look at the raw math.
Specifically, the uncompromising math of their energy consumption.
Let's get into those numbers because they dictate everything else that happens in this story. The Strait of Hormuz is essentially the central artery for global energy.
Right, it's a massive geographical bottleneck.
About 20% of the entire world's crude oil flows through this one narrow stretch of water.
And when you trace where those oil tankers are actually heading, all roads lead to Beijing.
Because China is the world's largest importer of energy.
Exactly. They buy more than 80% of Iran's exported oil.
Wait, 80%? That is a huge dependency.
It is. That specific Iranian oil makes up about 13.5% of all the crude oil that China imports by sea.
Okay, let me pause there. If I am looking at a map, I see that China shares a continent with a lot of oil-producing nations.
Right.
Why are they so heavily reliant on sea imports through a vulnerable choke point like Hormuz? I mean, why not just build more overland pipelines?
Well, overland pipelines are incredibly expensive to build, for one.
Okay.
And they are vulnerable to different types of geopolitical sabotage, but frankly, they just can't carry the sheer volume of oil that a fleet of supertankers can.
Just a volume issue then.
Yeah. A single supertanker carries 2 million barrels of oil. To feed an industrial machine the size of China, you need fleets of those tankers arriving continuously.
So sea freight is really the most efficient way to move that much liquid energy.
Exactly. So when Operation Epic Fury began back on February 28, 2026, and Iran effectively blocked the strait, it hit China harder than anyone else.
Because the Chinese economy relies entirely on a functioning, uninterrupted global market.
Right. They manufacture goods, they export those goods, and they need unfathomable amounts of energy to power the factories making them.
So without that oil flowing, the industrial engine just stops.
It stops cold. And we also have to factor in the economic context inside China right now.
Yeah, the sources point out that their government had already projected a pretty modest economic growth target for this year, just 4.5% to 5%.
Which is low for them. And they're dealing with a severe domestic property slump.
Right, that property slump is a crucial piece of the puzzle here.
It is, because when a country's domestic real estate market struggles, everyday citizens stop spending money.
They tighten their belts.
Exactly. And to compensate for that lack of domestic spending, the Chinese government has to double down on manufacturing and exporting goods to other countries.
But you cannot maintain a competitive export economy if your factory energy costs are skyrocketing, because global oil prices are at $119 a barrel.
The margin for error is basically zero. A closed strait threatens their bottom line in a way they simply cannot afford.
And it isn't just oil on the line either. They have poured tens of billions of dollars into the Middle East through their Belt and Road Initiative.
Right, the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI. It's Beijing's grand strategy to build physical trade routes, connecting Asia to the rest of the world.
So we are talking about funding special economic zones, deepwater ports, refineries, logistics networks all across the Middle East.
And extended closures or regional instability actively destroy the business case for those investments.
If the ports are closed due to war, the billions they spent building them are wasted.
Exactly. So Beijing is caught in a serious trap. They need the oil, and they need their trade routes open.
But if they send in their own military to secure the strait, they alienate their regional partners.
And they risk a direct, hard power confrontation with the U.S. Navy, which is currently dominating those waters.
Right, so how do you stop a war without getting your own hands dirty?
You use diplomacy through intermediaries. They needed the conflict to end, but they didn't want to take sole ownership of the peace process or look like an aggressive imperial power dictating terms.
So they provided the political weight for a ceasefire that was practically brokered by Pakistan.
Pakistan, it's a fascinating geopolitical twist, isn't it?
It really is. I would think China would just use its direct economic leverage over Tehran. I mean, they buy 80% of their oil. They could just threaten to stop buying.
You would think so, but threatening to stop buying oil hurt China just as much as it hurts Iran.
Oh, right. Mutual destruction.
Yeah. So instead, Pakistan's foreign minister, Ishaq Dar, hosted a four-nation meeting in Islamabad to build consensus.
And he brought together diplomats from Turkey, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia.
Right.
I see what they're doing here. It is like China is acting as the silent partner in a massive corporate merger, letting Pakistan do all the talking in the boardroom.
That's a perfect analogy. Pakistan has a shared border with Iran, but they also maintain workable ties with Washington.
They are the diplomatic shield.
Exactly. Pakistan serves as the friendly face that both sides are willing to engage with. But everyone in that room knows China's economic power is underwriting the entire negotiation.
Because China's the one writing the checks.
Right. And while Pakistan was managing those high-level talks in Islamabad, Chinese Special Envoy Zhai Jun went on a grueling shuttle tour across the Middle East to hammer out the details.
He traveled to Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Egypt.
He was everywhere.
And I want to slow down and focus on how this actually happened on the ground. We usually picture diplomats sitting in quiet, air-conditioned rooms in Geneva.
Right. Safely away from the action.
But because the airspace was closed due to the act of fighting, his diplomatic team literally had to drive across borders.
The logistics of that are incredibly dangerous.
Traveling by road through a region experiencing active conflict means navigating military checkpoints, damaged infrastructure, unpredictable airspace.
Yeah, the reports say they experienced air raid sirens going off. They watched missile interceptions happening firsthand from their vehicles. They were driving right through a hot war zone.
It shows a level of urgency you don't typically associate with cautious diplomatic envoys.
It demonstrates that Beijing viewed this mission as an absolute necessity for their own survival.
Ultimately, China and Pakistan released a 5-point peace proposal together.
Right, calling for an immediate ceasefire and for open navigation in the Strait of Hormuz to resume.
And it worked. The ships are moving.
They are.
By letting Pakistan lead the talks while providing the political muscle, China positions itself as a builder of peace.
They get the oil flowing again, and they get to look like the responsible adults in the room.
Drawing a sharp contrast with the United States military operations that triggered the crisis in the first place.
It is a significant diplomatic victory for Beijing on the global stage. They protected their trade interests without firing a single shot or entangling themselves in a quagmire.
Or at least it looks like a clean victory on paper.
Yeah, on paper.
China is taking a massive victory lap for this diplomacy, but there is a much darker shadow hanging over their involvement.
Right, the question of whether they were secretly fueling the exact fire they now claim to be putting out.
This is where we have to look at the conflicting reports very carefully, as always. We have multiple U.S. intelligence sources accusing China of supplying critical military and intelligence assistance to Iran right up until the ceasefire.
The specific allegations in these declassified reports are intense.
According to CBS and other sources, U.S. intelligence claimed China was preparing to ship man-pads to Iran through third countries.
And for you listening, man-pads are man-portable anti-aircraft weapons.
Think of them as shoulder-fired missiles that can take down helicopters or low-flying jets.
Very dangerous equipment to be moving around.
Definitely. The reports also allege that Chinese companies were providing chip-making tools directly to Iran's military.
And the allegations go beyond physical hardware, too. The United States-China Economic and Security Review Commission alleged that Iran was actively using China's Beidou navigation system to direct its missile attacks across the region.
Let's unpack that, because we hear about Beidou a lot. How does a navigation system help launch an attack?
Well, Beidou is basically China's equivalent to the American GPS system.
Okay.
On a basic level, it helps civilian smartphones navigate traffic. But satellite navigation systems operate on different frequencies.
So there's a public version and a military version.
Exactly. While the public gets a standard signal, the military can access an encrypted, high-precision signal.
Oh, I see.
The allegation is that Iran used this high-precision data from China to guide their ballistic missiles to specific targets with pinpoint accuracy.
That is a massive strategic advantage. And there was also a major leak investigated by the Financial Times, right?
Yeah, that document claimed Iran secretly acquired a high-resolution Chinese spy satellite back in late 2024 to monitor regional targets for military strikes.
Wow. Now, we must impartially present how China responded to all of this. Beijing vehemently denies every single one of these allegations.
They absolutely reject them.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry formally called the reports completely made up.
And the denials are coming from the very top.
Yeah, President Trump even stated publicly that Chinese President Xi Jinping personally assured him in a written letter that Beijing is not sending weapons to Iran.
Which is a huge statement to make on the international stage.
But the diplomatic victory itself is also being scrutinized by international analysts, right?
Yes. Some argue that China's role as a peacemaker is being deliberately overblown by state media.
They say China was simply pushing an open door.
Exactly.
What does that phrase mean in this context, pushing an open door?
It means the terms of the temporary ceasefire essentially gave Iran all of its maximalist demands anyway.
Oh, so they didn't really have to compromise.
Right. When a country gets exactly what it wants out of a negotiation, whether that is maintaining regional leverage, lifting specific pressures, or securing their maritime borders, convincing them to stop fighting doesn't require much heavy lifting.
The analysts are suggesting China didn't actually have to twist Iran's arm. They just handed them a favorable deal.
Pretty much.
I am looking at this whole picture, and it feels highly contradictory. How can a nation be the neutral peacemaker if they're allegedly supplying the navigation systems being used to wage the war?
This brings us to the highly nuanced world of dual-use technologies.
Dual use?
Yeah, we are talking about items like radar systems, satellite networks like Beidou, and high-resolution imaging.
Let me try to visualize this. It is like selling someone a heavy-duty pickup truck.
Okay.
They might use it to haul fertilizer for a farm, which is totally peaceful. Or they might weld armor plates to the doors, mount a machine gun in the back, and drive it into combat.
That is a very accurate way to look at it.
It is the exact same product, but the application changes everything.
Precisely. A high-resolution satellite meant for mapping agricultural terrain or tracking weather patterns can easily be used to spot troop movements or naval deployments.
Right.
A computer chip meant for an industrial manufacturing robot can be repurposed into the guidance system of a drone.
So China can sell these technologies under the umbrella of legitimate civilian commerce while knowing full well they have military applications.
And when we look at the broader geopolitical strategy, keeping a partner like Iran capable of defending itself prevents a total regional collapse.
Which China wants to avoid at all costs.
Right, because if Iran's government were to completely fall, It would plunge the entire Middle East into chaos.
That level of instability would be disastrous for China's energy security and their Belt and Road infrastructure investments.
They need the region stable enough to do business, but they also need their partners strong enough to survive.
It highlights the incredibly complex reality of maintaining a global equilibrium.
It really does. You ensure your strategic partner doesn't fall by providing economic and technological support.
But you also have to aggressively step in and stop the fighting the moment it starts hurting your own economic bottom line.
Exactly. We are presenting the facts from both sides here, the serious U.S. intelligence claims and the firm, absolute Chinese denials, and it illustrates just how complicated modern geopolitical alliances really are.
Especially when you have the U.S. taking such a hardline stance with its naval blockades, forcing everyone else to adapt to that reality.
Right, the American military presence forces countries like China to rely entirely on these back-channel economic maneuvers instead of direct force.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, right now? Let's bring this massive geopolitical chess game back down to the reality of your daily life.
Because it definitely impacts everyone.
This isn't just about politicians in faraway capitals. It affects the cost of the gas in your car, the price of groceries impacted by shipping costs, and the global supply chains that build the phone in your pocket.
The immediate reality is that the ships are moving again in the Strait of Hormuz.
Oil is back under $90 a barrel.
And the global markets are recovering.
But the U.S. blockade on Iranian ports remains active. American destroyers are still out there enforcing the perimeter.
So the peace we are seeing today is temporary, and it is incredibly fragile.
We have watched how the raw math of energy needs forced a superpower to step out of the shadows.
We analyzed how they use back-channel diplomacy, sending envoys driving through active missile fire, all to prevent an economic catastrophe.
And we've examined the dual-use technology allegations that complicate their role as a peacemaker.
It fundamentally changes how we have to look at global conflict going forward.
The levers of power aren't just military anymore. They are deeply economic.
When the cost of a regional war becomes too expensive for global trade to sustain, the pressure to end it comes from boardrooms just as much as situation rooms.
Which leaves us with a lingering question for you to chew on today.
Something to think about.
If an economic powerhouse can broker a ceasefire simply because it needs the oil to keep flowing to its factories, what does that mean for the future of global conflict?
It's a huge question.
Will the next world war be stopped, not by politicians or armies, but by supply chain managers and stock markets demanding that business return to normal?
It completely reframes how we view international security. The global economy might just be the most effective deterrent to war we have left.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope this gave you the clarity you need to understand the complex forces driving the headlines today. Keep digging, keep exploring, and keep asking questions. Until next time.